Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and a massive thank you to Wizz Selvey, who's one of the Women's Chapter members, an expert in retail and helping brands to cut through the noise and really stand out, which I think, considering the last year and a half that we've had, it's been an incredibly challenging time in business, but more important than ever to be present and to be connecting with our audiences, but also being noticed. Because digital channels have become so much more important. But Wiz is going to be sharing with us today a trend forecast around the retail landscape and what she sees now that retail is opening up again and we're moving back toward some sort of new normal. So Wiz, it's a great honor to have you really, and for you to have you share your expertise with us today. We've got lots of different kinds of businesses in the room today. So I know that everybody's going to be able to take something really valuable away from this. In terms of housekeeping rules, everyone, please do keep yourselves on mute. I will spotlight Wiz so that she remains the key speaker today. If you've got questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Wiz, I can then flag those up to you as we go along, or we can have some breaks for questions along the way. So please do, be interactive. Let us know what you're thinking. Ask your questions so that we can all make sure that we get the most out of this hour with the amazing Wiz. So Wiz, I'm going to hand over to you, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience just to set the scene for everybody before we move into the trend forecast.
Perfect. Well, yes, thank you everyone for joining today. I'd love to know a bit more about your business and your brand, actually. So if you pop that in the chat, and then I can look at the end when we're taking questions as well, because it will help me better answer questions for you. So yeah, I'm Wiz. I'm the founder of WIZZ&CO. I help brands and retailers create deeper connections with customers to ultimately increase market share and sales. I'm obsessed with customer behaviour. I speak regularly on the topic, and I contribute to lots of publications such as Cosmetic Business Trend Reports. I've been featured in WGSN, The Guardian, You Magazine, NatWest Business. I work with a cross-section of brands, from global brands and retailers to independent brand founders. It's not about the size of the business, but it's actually the ambition, and they share the same values. So a desire to disrupt and to innovate the market. And they're passionate and they're not scared to take action, which I'm sure why you're all here today. So prior to that, I spent 12 amazing years working at Selfridges. I was head of beauty buying, but I started off in fashion. I was accessories and jewelry and lifestyle buyer. I also worked in luggage and menswear as well. So have really worked across the board with a huge cross section of brands. And again, most of you know Selfridges, but they are really cheerleaders for sourcing the hottest, newest brands, but also working with established brands as well. So as a result, I'm in this kind of unique position where I've seen strategies from all the big global brands many, many times and pitched to thousands of times. So I kind of really know what works and how to stand out. At WIZZ&CO, I've also worked with retailers such as Ocado. When they owned a beauty business called Fabled by Marie Claire, I went in to help them launch a partnership with Next Beauty. So the integration of beauty to Next, and then the sale of the business from Ocado to Next. And I also have a membership for indie brand founders as well. So please ask questions as we go, and that's great that Michelle will be able to feed those in as well. I'd love to know what your feedback is after this as well. So please do come and follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, tag me if you want with your key takeaway. So on to the nitty gritty. So we're all coming out, I think, feeling very optimistic. I certainly am, about this post-COVID world, particularly in the UK anyway. And today I want to talk to you about how you can really start to gain more market share, because the market has completely fast forwarded in the last year, which I'm sure you're aware of. So it's making sure you're keeping up with the trends, but also ultimately customer behaviour and what's happening in the retail market, so you can leverage that. So I'm going to be talking about the reopening of physical retail and where customers will be spending. Will digital channels continue to offer the same growth trajectory? And also how to create a seamless customer experience with an omni-channel strategy. And I'll give you an action point for each one of these as we go through. So do take notes. So to kick off the reopening of physical retail and where customers are spending, I mean, it's been a really interesting time. Obviously, I don't think anybody could have predicted in our lifetime that literally just non-essential retail would just be closed. But actually, in many recessions over the last hundreds of years, there has always been a redistribution of where people shop. And this is no different. Obviously, retailers open back up again, which is great. We've seen some amazing sales from some key players and categories, which is super exciting. But rather than people shopping less, it's really just a redistribution of where people are shopping. So there's still going to be these destination stores which are trading very well. The likes of Selfridges, for example, Oxford Street, Knightsbridge, Harrods is still a destination, but actually a lot more people will be shopping more locally as well. I think people have really understand over the last 12 months that where they spend in their local high streets is really going back into the local area and where they live. And of course, with more people shopping as well. So there's going to be this hyper local trend. Destination shopping is becoming more and more important because people want to go for a big day out shopping. Big cities are still going to be key. Some things won't become as London centric, which I'm quite pleased about. A lot of brands really do focus sometimes too heavily on London, but actually it's a massive opportunity because there are customers all around the country and in every country in the world as well that shop more than the big cities. So this is a massive opportunity for brands to get a deeper customer engagement if you are doing things outside of London as well. A lot of stores are investing in physical experience as well. It's really exciting time, but these stores know that they have to be innovating and creating that footfall as well. So services are going to become more and more important, a kind of a hybrid mix of retailers combining forces, collaborating, which is super exciting. We're certainly seeing it a lot more in the US, but I anticipate it coming in the UK as well, with kind of Sephora and Ulta partnering with Kohl's and Target, which is super exciting. So they're kind of those shop-in-shop concepts, but not just the product-based shop-in-shops, it's also services as well. And Anya Highmarsh, for example, has announced that she's creating a kind of a destination shopping village, which is really all about kind of services, experience, dining, and all of her installations she's ever done over the years have been super creative. So things like this are really exciting. And a lot of big brands are investing in physical retail because they know this is a way to really engage with customers. So really think about if you're looking to work with retailers and pitch to them, which I always advise to have as part of your retail strategy. Obviously, D2C is a really strong channel, but actually retail partnerships will really position your brand globally. And it will really also help you attract lots of customer interest very quickly, because you'll suddenly be sat on the shelves physically or digitally alongside some of the biggest players. So think about who your key players are that you could potentially be targeting, or how you can optimize the ones you're already trading in. And also think about kind of those local kind of shopping experiences as well.
Liz?
Yeah.
Just a quick question, because actually I noticed today, and maybe it's not new news, but that Selfridges has launched a wedding service.
Yes.
And they're actually going to be having weddings in store, but literally an end-to-end where you can plan your wedding, arrange your gift registry, have the actual ceremony, and then go on and have the reception afterwards, which I mean, I think is just such a good example of how retail brands are really, our retailers are innovating and realizing that they need to adapt and bring in new products and services, as you were talking about. But I wonder what your thoughts on is that these kinds of innovations, are they advantages for smaller brands? You know, because also from a digital perspective, you look at the likes of, say, Marks and Spencer now becoming a platform, a multi-brand platform, and we've seen that with other online channels as well. Are these opportunities that smaller brands should be going after as they emerge?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one, because it's definitely a balance when you're a smaller brand as well, about how many retailers you are stocked with. One of the challenges can certainly be is working with too many retailers as a small brand. It can be, and too many small retailers, it can be a huge time drain. So actually working with a couple of key large retailers can give you much more leverage, because it does take account management, of course, to work with a retailer. And it's not just about launching with that retailer, it's then about how you're trading the business and kind of continuing to keep the buyer excited and their customers excited. So retailers are having to work harder than ever to create a different customer experience. So they're becoming more competitive, whether it's with kind of product range or experiences. So yeah, it's exciting times, but I think everyone's having to work harder, I suppose, as you would expect with kind of any kind of challenging times that we've come through. So what I would advise, I suppose, with more local retailers as well, is really think about not spreading yourself too thinly. I think if you're a brand founder and you live in a certain area, it's always about having your own profile as a founder, because there are lots and lots and lots of brands out there, but actually there's only one of you, and you can only deliver and talk about and communicate your brand in your way. So it's quite interesting, I think, to then look at your local area and where you're stocked as well, because actually once people get to know you, it's quite an interesting way, and it's a good way to build brand loyalty as well.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I live out of London, and I would definitely say that from, my friends and the people that I know, our shopping habits have changed like that, because there's hesitance. Obviously, we don't want to necessarily get on a train to go into London. And yes, if you're planning a big destination shopping day, then you would do that. But for day-to-day things or discovering new brands, it's really great to be able to support local suppliers. And I mean, the high streets are pretty dire, really, in terms of the number of shops that have disappeared and the retail space that's available, etc. So it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on what you think will happen there, and whether or not that's an opportunity for smaller brands. But I think definitely to build a brand awareness for your brand within your local community is a great opportunity that maybe a lot of us wouldn't have considered before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's a really interesting business model at the moment is marketplaces. There's a lot of independent marketplaces coming together who are curating an edit of independent brands. I think this is quite challenging. So I suppose the obvious one is Wolf and Badger. I think this is quite challenging when that retailer is an online only channel, because customers can shop anywhere they like. And if customers why wouldn't they buy directly from the brand's website, where there may be a loyalty program or an incentive? Because if they want to buy multiple products, they're still going to get separate shipments. But I think the opportunity with independent marketplaces is where they're facilitating and supporting these brands with physical pop-ups, and where they can kind of, I suppose, roam around the country. I think Psychology is an amazing one, and they're popped up this week on Oxford Street. They have a location in Richmond as well. So I think platforms like this are really exciting, because it's very hard as a small brand to pop up. It's very expensive. There's a huge amount of infrastructure that you kind of haven't even thought about. But Enterprise Nation is kind of really helping to drive this as well. And there's lots of, I predict there's going to be lots of these that are going to be kind of doing road shows and traveling around the country and popping up in different locations, and actually kind of having an umbrella business like a marketplace that can help execute this is a really exciting opportunity to actually just meet your customers as well, find out more about them, and kind of get that exposure where people can touch and feel them. So I always advise not too many marketplaces if they're online only, but I definitely do advise if they're helping with physical pop-ups as well.
And do you think some of the disused retail spaces that we're seeing will become pop-up spaces for marketplaces like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a peer here is a company that's been doing pop-up spaces for a long time, but they'll be collaborating with kind of a lot more of these independent businesses, and they've done a campaign called Save the Street, which is all about saving the high street, which is really exciting as well. But yeah, I think that locally people don't want to see these empty shops, and there's going to be opportunities for people popping up. I think landlords are looking at things differently, potentially commission-based models. So a bit like you'd have a concession in a department store. So people are having to rethink things, because actually an empty shop isn't bringing in any money, whereas if it's just a commission basis, maybe there's an opportunity for them.
Well, that's a good example of don't ask, don't get. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's there may well be an opportunity, especially for people outside of London, where there's the spaces on their local high streets, that they, if they know they've got enough of a community in that area, to get hold of the landlord and propose something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, I think watch out for these physical marketplaces. I think they're going to be really interesting. And then also how they partner as pop-ups in larger retail stores as well, because it's indie brands are growing fast, but it's very hard for a buyer to be managing multiple different independent brands as well, because often they're new to retail as well, and the buyers are very, very time poor. So it's very hard to be helping them on that journey, which kind of is a big frustration from brands, because they don't understand retail yet, which is kind of what I offer as well, is trying to educate people on that as well, because it's an exciting step, but I know it's very scary as well.
And in terms of when you were saying, you help brands, if a brand needed help connecting with a retailer or understanding what the right mix for them was around their distribution channels, is that the sort of thing that you would do through your membership programs and the consulting work that you do?
Yeah, I help brands behind the scenes. So I would advise them on the market. I would help them review their distribution strategy. I'd help them get their pitch pack ready. So a combination of working directly with me and online education as well. So kind of I've helped with the retail landscape and where they should be positioning themselves and kind of the strategy side of things. And then if people want the direct introductions or someone to manage it for them, then maybe look for an agent or a distributor. So kind of I'm the strategy side, and then you have agents and distributors which will kind of manage that process for you. So again, I suppose this was my key takeaway from this point, is really understanding about how are you planning your various different channels, because it's what is your mix of business going to be? What's your mix of business now, but how are you planning to scale this? And it's having the right distribution channels for your brand, for where your customer is shopping, looking at new opportunities, as well. But it's really important to be focusing and thinking, okay, how do I set my business up for success in the future? And also don't be scared to close accounts if they're not working as well, because you don't want too many retailers, because sometimes it can be a huge time drain. It can be very hard if everybody's trading online and might potentially be offering different discounts or promotions. So actually you want to be using these retail partnerships to leverage your direct-to-consumer business. So it's fine-tuning it, it's trying to get the right balance. And of course, there's some trial and error and pivoting going in there. But yeah, I think a regular review is also really important.
And Wiz, in terms of the landscape right now and brands working with retailers, is part of that decision-making process looking at what benefits the retailers offer you? Because I think there's always this sort of perception that all the work has to be done on the behalf of the brand and they've got to fight to get in with the retailer. But with the changes in what we've seen over the last year, do brands have more power now in terms of kind of being able to say, well, actually, what are you going to give me? What marketing will you give me? What physical support will you give me in terms of pop-ups, etc.? Yeah. Do we hold a bit more power than we think we do?
It completely depends on the brand. And I suppose this is a really interesting question, because if you're pitching to the buyer, you're pitching. But if a buyer is chasing you and wants to meet you, you have a bit more power. So it's how do you build that hype around your brand? Because generally, as a former buyer, you have a list of brands that you want to stock. And it's very rare that someone will pitch to you and you're like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, maybe we should launch this, because you're all over the trends. You're kind of a futurist. You're looking at what people want is 6 months, a year down the line. You completely understand customer behavior. So actually, it's kind of a twofold game, really. There's the direct pitch, but also you want to be creating this buzz in the market, which is going to get a buyer coming to you. And then if that's the case, that's when you have a bit more power. And also, if you're doing that to build your brand and kind of creating that hype, then ultimately that's going to increase more customers as well. So it's kind of twofold, really.
And talking about customers, what are your thoughts or predictions on what we're going to see in terms of consumer spending and consumer behavior?
So interesting statistic actually that came out after the first week of retail reopening, non-essential, and the beauty industry pre-COVID was 80% of purchases were still made in store, which is huge. And actually the numbers in the first week of trading, it was only minus 1% on 2019. So people had gone out and continued that level of spending, which is absolutely amazing. And McKinsey has forecast this to kind of plateau out about 65%. And fashion isn't that different. So people still want to touch and feel. And I suppose consumer spending is also really thinking about people have in lots of different scenarios, but there's a definite revenge spending, and we saw this happen in China kind of last summer, where people hadn't spent anything, and people just wanted to go out and splurge. A lot of people have been hit hard, of course, by the last 12 months, but actually a lot of people have a lot more disposable income. They haven't been going out, they haven't been going on holidays, they haven't been buying the things they normally would. So a lot of people have got this disposable income where they're ready to spend. And a lot of financial forecasters are expecting this to happen as well, and actually for the economy to bounce back quite quickly, which is super exciting, I think, for every brand and retailer out there. So it's making sure you're getting the cut through to get the spending power.
And so would you still recommend then that you don't have, as a brand, you wouldn't have all of your eggs in one basket, that you really are thinking about how you're tapping into those different consumer trends and that appetite for buying? Because I certainly, if I see I live near Guildford on Saturday and Sunday, you can't get a parking space. People are just, and they're shopping for whichever shops are left, because obviously there are a lot that are gone. But it is kind of one of those things where you look back and think, wow, as you quite rightly said, there is money there. People have it, whether it's because they haven't been spending on train tickets into London or going out. But your advice to a brand then, what would that be in terms of them diversifying their portfolio, I guess, of channels, or that omni-channel, as you mentioned?
Yeah, it's really looking at where your customer wants to shop as well, and it's not going too diverse too quickly, but actually picking some key players and really spending time to understand those retailers if you're pitching to them. I suppose in my experience, being at Selfridges, is lots of people didn't properly do their research about the business, and it really shows. And you can be studying that retailer, you can be popping in on a regular basis, being on their email list, looking at their marketing campaigns, getting on their social media. What brands are they launching? What brands aren't there anymore? What's going on the homepage? What's on the displays? What's in the windows? There's lots of ways you can start to understand that retailer. So it's really, really about doing your research before you pitch to them as well. But ultimately, it's about working out where your customer wants to shop. And actually, I think there's a couple of really interesting collaborations that have happened in the last 12 months. Is Charlotte Tilbury has now launched an edit on Ocado, which I think is very, very different to the rest of the beauty industry. But actually, that's her core products that people buy on a repeat purchase. So actually, that's thinking about the customer. The customer just wants it to be easy. They just want to add something to their basket. It's not the whole range, because if you want to go and have a makeover and explore new things, you're probably going to go into store or kind of have a bigger experience online. And it's the same with John Lewis. Kind of, they've had to readdress their store portfolios, but they're creating kind of smaller John Lewis hubs as part of kind of the Waitrose offer. So they're capitalizing on the footfall as well. So again, it's kind of all those people are thinking about the customer, which again is, if you're a brand, is for you to be thinking about that as well. So I think direct to consumer is kind of such a buzzword, and it's quite hard to build a purely direct to consumer business without a lot of digital marketing spend. I mean, we see Glossier, which is amazing, which is this huge unicorn brand, but actually they had £1 million funding before they got going. And they got that funding because they had a huge customer base already, and they took the customer on that journey. But actually, I would say for the majority of brands, and again, it's all brand specific, it's really having kind of a balance of one or two big key retailers, if you haven't started working with retailers yet, some really nice independent stores that kind of position your brand well, and just constantly reassessing them as well, and using a lot of that to leverage your own channels as well. So how is your experience different for retailers, and how is it different for your own website as well?
So where does Amazon come in this conversation? Because talking about the likes of Ocado and obviously other, from a convenience perspective, that seems like such a natural place to be. But is it something that is accessible to brands? Is it hard work to get on Amazon?
It completely depends on what your brand is and whether it's right for you, and it's how people search for things. So I think we probably all are Amazon user, but it's basically it's a product type based search. So generally, unless you're a big household name, it's quite rare that you will shop by brand. So unless it's having that brand awareness that people can go directly and shop there. So if people are looking for a long black skirt, then yeah, Amazon might work, but they might not be looking up, for example, a Topshop black skirt. So it's just a different type of search and research. And once you get onto Amazon, there just isn't that customer experience or that kind of way of shopping, to browse, to discover. Even on Amazon grocery is quite hard to shop. I've tried it, and it's just hasn't got that same browsing opportunity to discover new things. So again, that's going back to, what is your brand? How does your customer want to find you? Are they simply looking for a vitamin C serum and you could potentially rank, but where do you rank in that? Because actually, are they pushing the brands that are sold well or advertising to the top? So it's also looking at your competition on there. What would a customer be searching and who's your competition, and are you the right fit? So again, it depends on your brand, your product range, and yeah, whether your customer wants to shop on there.
And what advice do you have around customer journey? Because that's such an important part of it, but it's also an element that I think many brands overlook. Is there something we should be doing right from the very beginning, some cornerstones?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and it's something I focus on actually in my online membership, because what I see a lot of the time is people focus on kind of 1 or 2 stages, and actually I split this down into 6 stages. So you go from kind of building your brand awareness, and then it's kind of taking people to the interest stage. Then they're kind of really considering, and then they purchase at the 3rd stage. It's then about how you retain them, which is really, really important. Then it's about loyalty, which people often think it stops there, but actually it's then about brand advocates. And that's really about how loyalty is when somebody purchases for a 2nd time, but brand advocates is when people are raving about your brand to their friends. And that's what creates the hype, actually, of kind of around one of these kind of a new brand that's around. And suddenly you see this explosion and kind of, you're like, I've never heard of this brand before, but it's suddenly everywhere and I've got to try it. So it's really thinking about all the different stages that you're at in that customer journey, and which ones you're focusing on. Because often you can kind of get really stuck potentially in the awareness stage, and it actually takes a really long time for people to convert from awareness. People have to see your brand multiple times before they convert to a sale. So actually it can feel like a real slog at this stage. But if you're already trading your business, which I imagine most people here are, then you have already got customers that you could potentially resell to. So people often forget about, okay, how can I get this low-hanging fruit, and kind of really focus there. So again, that's kind of what I work with people on my membership, is getting people to really zone out, which is one of the biggest challenges of kind of having a business. And for any business owner, it's really kind of, how do you kind of zone out, look at the bigger picture, and think about what new strategies you want to implement, but then also what can you outsource to kind of free up some of your time to be able to do that as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And what about, because you were just talking about ambassadors, and obviously we all have the ability through our communities to generate organic ambassadors, so people who off their own back go out there and shout about our products and tell their friends. But there are also quite a few membership models out there, Beauty Pie being one of them, where obviously you're incentivized to be an ambassador. Is that a model that we'll be seeing more of, do you think? Because it really is about kind of rapidly building communities. And when you were talking about Glossier, that sort of made me think the same thing. Beauty Pie is very much about the membership. Will we see more of that, do you think?
Yeah, I think less of the membership, but more of the ambassadors for sure. And I think Tropic Skincare is a key one. And actually, in the Times did a top 100 fastest growing profit during COVID businesses, and the only kind of, I suppose, luxury branded product that was in there was Tropic, and that is all done through an ambassador network. And they don't work with retailers, they don't really do D2C, and it's all done through this kind of this ambassador network. Even the Body Shop's doing it now, Neil's Yard are. So it's definitely something that's quite big in beauty. And yeah, I haven't seen it so much in fashion yet, but I do actually think it could be an interesting opportunity.
And do you think we because we've already started to see a move away from this, but will we see more brands using real people as the influencers for their products and their services? Because I certainly was having a conversation with some other business owners the other day, and they were saying about how they far prefer to use real women, real people wearing their clothes rather than the models. It's obviously cheaper, but it also gives people an opportunity to kind of find someone they can relate to, identify with in their marketing. Is that something we'll see more of with beauty brands and fashion brands?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the biggest opportunity for any brand. I suppose it's twofold. One is the models and kind of who you're modeling on. And actually, I saw a beauty brand the other day that an advert in a magazine, and it really annoyed me actually, because it was a model who was probably under 30. It was the beauty brand that was targeting I think people in their 50s, and it was a model under 30 with dyed grey hair. And I was like, you've just got this so wrong. What are you doing? But again, people see through that. Customers are savvy. Like, it's silly. But yeah, it's that directly relatable thing. And one of the biggest surges at the moment is on user-generated content, which is a massive opportunity for any brand, because people can relate and they can see lots of different reviews, and they trust it more. 70% of people trust user-generated content more than branded content. People can see a person that looks like them, hear about a problem that they have, and they can think, okay, that worked for them, it's going to work for me. And it's a really simple way and cost-effective and time-effective way of creating new content as well.
I know we spoke about this in the last workshop that you did with us, the importance of community, and that being one of the kind of key pillars of building a successful brand is really building your community. But also, I know that you spoke about personal brand. So the founder being, willing to put themselves out there and share their story and attract like-minded people to their brand. Does that still hold true now that we're kind of moving away from just digital as the channel that we've come to know over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. More than ever, it's more important, because there are so many brands out there, and there's more and more brands popping up all the time. So how do you differentiate? And I think everybody that started a brand sees a gap in the market, but actually it's about communicating that very clearly. But purchases are often made emotively, unless it's FMCG and I need some new toilet paper, for example, then actually most purchases are made emotively, and it's a really easy way to connect with the customer. And also the last 12 months have really fast-tracked people, where people are really consciously thinking about where they're spending their money. So whether it's shopping locally, or it's actually shopping with somebody who is a small business and they know that their money is going directly to that person, so they'd much rather spend their money with those people and feel like that they're supporting them as well.
Absolutely. And I think from the perspective of women-led businesses, certainly what I've seen as we've built the women's chapter community is that there's willingness for women to support other women, but it often starts with you hearing their story and wanting to have a part of it in some way, and then using the power of your purse to contribute to the success of their business, and I guess seeing them continue that journey and that story. And I think it's something that definitely brands often overlook or shy away from sharing their stories and their personal journeys, because certainly for me, and I know many other people, that's where my consumer journey starts with a brand, is hearing someone's story and thinking, wow, that's amazing, I want to be part of that, and I want to put my money behind them. So yeah, I think that's brilliant advice, to really for us to not neglect our personal story and journey and hide behind our brands, as much as that can be terrifying, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest hurdle, is kind of putting yourself out there. But once you do, you start to definitely gain traction and momentum. And for example, beginning of 2020, I thought, okay, I'm going to pitch myself to speak at one event a month. And I thought I want to kind of put myself out there. This is kind of pre-COVID, so then a lot of that moved online. But actually, within the last week, I've got 5 speaking events. Probably too much to have in this space of time, but kind of now the opportunities are coming to me. I kind of planned things in the diary, which was great, and then all these other ones kept popping up. So put yourself out there, and then you kind of start to reap the rewards as well.
And in terms of a pitch deck or our conversations with retailers, is that something that should feature as well? I mean, how much of your personal story would you share when you were trying to get a spot with a retailer?
Yeah, definitely it should feature. It shouldn't say, a lot of the times it's a founder and they say, I created this because there was a gap in the market. And usually when you start your journey, absolutely is, but the buyer needs to understand that that is a true gap in the market as well. And I think you need to be really honest with yourself and says, are there any other brands that are doing this? And what are the brands that retailer is stocking? So it's creating a summary of kind of a short extract of what your brand story is. Definitely put your face in it and put your reason why you're doing it. But they're probably more interested in seeing about how you're connecting that story with your customers to create customer engagement. Because otherwise, you've got to think about, they really want to know that the brand's going to take a lot of money in their store. So you need to be proving the commercial value to them as well. So it's definitely including the brand story, but making it about them rather than all about you. And that's the connection that is often missed in a pitch deck to a buyer as well. So it's how you're using it to leverage your point of difference, the kind of engagement that you've got with customers, and why people, I suppose, love you is the key thing.
Thank you. We've actually had a question from Claire. Claire has an independent store, and she's also a buyer. She's asking about ambassadors. And do you mean the ambassador in the sense that you encourage your existing customers to shout about you on Instagram or Facebook? Or is there another way that you can engage ambassadors or create ambassadors in a really meaningful way?
Yeah, I mean, the initial thing to do if you haven't got it in place is a refer a friend scheme. So it incentivizes their friend to come in and they get a reward as well. So that's where I would say start. And that's only do that if you have loyal customers who are returning. So then put that refer a friend in place, and then you can kind of create huge ambassador programs if you've kind of ticked those boxes, which is a bit more in depth.
Thank you. Wizz, I don't know if you've got more content covered. In the meantime, I'll encourage anyone to have, if they've got questions, to pop them in the chat so that we can kind of keep the conversation going, because I appreciate that I've been asking lots of questions, but I might well have some.
Yeah, no, it's great, thank you. And I think I'm covering a lot of it, the content I had through the conversation, which is brilliant. But yeah, it is really thinking about, I suppose, talking about the digital channels as well, will they offer the same growth trajectory? But actually they are going to be just as important still as well. And I think it's just going to be kind of, I suppose, reassessing the balance. And it depends on your product type as well and how people want to experience and shop it as well. So again, it's very hard for me to kind of, I suppose, to give a generic outlook. But if it's something that's easy to repurchase, then of course, digital is the way forward. But if it's something that somebody wants to discover, touch, feel, try, then actually that physical experience is going to be really, really important. And it is getting harder to cut through the noise, particularly on digital marketing as well, because everybody's going after it. And actually on digital marketing, that's usually a conversion point as well. So if people see one digital marketing ad, it's unlikely that they're going to convert to it. It's usually that reminder that actually they've seen your brand a few times, and actually then it's a conversion point. So I suppose the key takeaway on that is really to think about how you get your cut through on digital. So it's really understanding about what your true USP is, what are your true unique selling points, what is your problem you're really, really solving, and then what was the point? True USP and how you get through to your customer. So what's your customer profile and how do you niche down? So the thing I see a lot of people is they're scared of niching down and really kind of having a targeted customer, because they think, well, if I target down to this, I know I've got kind of these few customers or this segment of customers that aren't in that gap and they're going to feel alienated. But absolutely don't worry about that, because you don't need to be liked by everybody, and I'm sure those people who are loyal customers will continue to shop with you as well. So that's kind of a way I work with people on a one-to-one basis, is kind of really nailing what that unique selling point is. And again, it's something that you need to be really confident about as well. And I see a lot of people wobble on this. They worry that it's not quite enough or it's not quite right. So that's kind of definitely a one-to-one process that I absolutely love doing, because it's kind of really getting to, I suppose, the soul of your brand and how you really want to communicate that, which will kind of really start to unlock growth as well, because it will help you communicate to your customer with your marketing. If you invest in digital, what goes on your website, any press you do, your brand story, it's just so integral to building your brand.
And to what extent should brands be asking their customers what they want and where they want to see them? Because I think that's often a challenge, and is finding that balance between engaging your community and asking them what they want, but also maybe giving them the impression that you don't know what you're doing. So it's kind of like, is that something that you would work with your brands around?
Yeah, and I think it's not asking them for the sake of asking them, but it's what are they loving? What do they want to see more of? What are they potentially not engaging with, and why? And there's different ways of going about it as well. There's kind of everything from kind of thinking about a survey to having events with them and just chatting to them. There are focus groups as well. So I think there's lots of different ways of doing it. But I think there's defining who your target customer is, then who your existing customer is, and then is that crossing over, or do you think you've got a bigger opportunity somewhere else as well? So I think, again, it's understanding why you want to know and what you want to know, but it's helpful to help you build your brand for sure.
And in terms of challenges for brands going forward, because obviously we've navigated an unprecedented set of challenges over the last 14 months. What do you foresee are going to be stumbling blocks for other brands that are relatively new in the market, or those that are just coming into the market?
It's how you're getting the cut through and how you're going to connect with the customers, and ultimately that will in turn impact your sales. So it's really how you're getting your brand out there into multiple different places. And also, people are a lot busier now, so it was great to discover things online before, but actually people have less time. They're socializing, they're thinking about holidays, they're planning things, or they're going to exercise classes, like things. People have less time now as well, and I think people are coming out of this with a bit of an overwhelm, like, oh, I've got too much to do, and so kind of doing things and then kind of pulling back. So yeah, it's really about how you stand out, and I think that's at any time, but more important than ever. So again, going back to what is your point of difference to the market, which you probably believe in, because you would have created your brand, but actually how is that perceived by customers? Is that getting the traction, and making sure you're keeping it ahead of the market and create an exciting, engaging communication with them.
Yeah, and I think that's a place where I guess market masterminds and closed user groups of real true peers come in, because you have the opportunity to say to other people who are who fit your client profile or your customer profile, to say, when you go onto my website, or when you go onto my app, what does it say to you? What does it tell you about what we do and what we sell, and where do you feel that we're positioned? And I think that's also, I know that that's something that your membership offers, but we also do that through the women's chapter, and it's been really interesting to see how people are really embracing that sense of community and being able to kind of ask the difficult questions and be a bit vulnerable, where maybe you don't want to go out to your customer base to ask them that, but you've got an opportunity to ask other people and keep sense checking if what you're doing is hitting the right notes.
Yeah, and don't be scared to pivot. Brands pivot all the time. Google used to be called Back Rub for the first 2 years, and Nike used to be called Blue Ribbon. So, I mean, the biggest brands have changed names. Look at the Apple logo over the years. It's just completely evolved. So it's all about an evolution. So don't worry about changing, pivoting. Lots of people think, oh God, people will think it's weird, things have changed. And I say, if they remember what you were doing before, that's bloody amazing, because people are like a goldfish. Like, people don't remember anything. There's so much information out there, and if they do remember, that's fantastic, because it means they really are I suppose, a true fan of your brand. So yeah, don't be scared of changing things up if you need to, kind of seeing where the path takes you.
Yeah, we were having a conversation actually on Instagram Live with Laura Morgan, who's one of our members, and 9 different businesses, and she has a really frank approach to, you know, the last 14 months, but also going forward, and saying this is the perfect opportunity to stop and ask yourself if you're flogging a dead horse, or if you actually are, you know, you are contributing something meaningful and you have growth in your brand. And if you don't, make a change, pivot, look for opportunity, because out of crisis comes great opportunity, as we all know. But it's just a case of sometimes taking a step back and being willing to look for the opportunities rather than being buried by the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm an optimist, so I can always spot avenues for change and growth, and things that people haven't spotted. So,
well, we had a question from Karen about any advice that you have on product rollout. Do you think there's an optimum or minimum number of product launches per year?
It's not just launching for the sake of launching. It's making sure that they're meaningful and why you're launching them. And I suppose, again, what the point of difference is to the customer and obviously in your range. So if it's just something for the sake of it, definitely don't do it. And then also it's whether it's you're doing it just for marketing or it's actually kind of something that's in demand and will complement the range. So there is no fixed number of kind of an ideal scenario. It obviously creates marketing, but then you can still create marketing around, I suppose, different activations or collaborations or events and things as well. So don't just rely on new product launches to, I suppose, for brand activation.
And Carol's asking, how important is customer service in brick and mortar sales?
It is very important, and I think is a challenge for all retailers, particularly as digital has accelerated in the last kind of 5 years. A lot of stores have actually put more investment in digital and then kind of taken money away from customer experience with retailers. So the ones that are investing in that will surely be the ones that shine out. But actually, so many people now research brands before they go into store, and then they go into store to check them out. So generally they will have Googled things 3 or 5 times to kind of to get to a point where they might like them. Just go shopping now and look at people who are browsing and they've got their phone out at the same time and they're looking online and they're looking at the product. So make sure you've got great content online as well, not only for your website, but actually people are shopping in physical space as well. And also I think it depends what country you're in. The UK, I think we're, as a kind of I suppose as a nation, we're a bit more reserved and we don't necessarily want lots of help. So we will have done that research and are kind of sometimes okay to navigate the way ourselves, whereas in America, it's kind of very service-based. So yeah, it's definitely a hybrid.
And we've got another question here. What key things should I look for in a women's wear showroom agent to represent my brand? And this is from Hetal, who's the founder of Vi.
I mean, look at what other brands that they're stocking, and do your research on what brands, retailers that those brands are stocked in. I think it's about someone who you think you can have an honest relationship at the end of the day, somebody that resonates with you. So of course, do all your due diligence as you would with any kind of contracts, commercial terms, what they think the opportunity is, but do your research as well. And then ultimately, I think working with anybody, it's about, can you have, do you feel like you've got a strong and trusting relationship with that person?
We had advice once from one of the other women's chapter members, actually, Whitney Bromberg Hawkins from Flowerbox, and she said, don't ever go into business with anyone that you don't want to have dinner with.
Yes.
It's you know, someone that you wouldn't choose to spend your time with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I heard somebody once say about getting investment. If you have an investor, you want to get married to them. It's basically like it's more intense than being married. And I was like, yeah, that's true as well. So
I guess also, you know, when as part of that decision to choose your channels, you know, whether that be online, retailers, agents, showrooms, what about the consideration around sustainability and their values lining up with those? Is that something you would recommend as well, that people kind of dig into the supply chain, I guess, or how they do business in order to make sure that it's something that aligns with your values?
Yeah, if that's part of your values, definitely it needs to be part of the values of any partner that you work with as well, or any potential retailer that might be focused on that as well, which is where that, I suppose, due diligence comes in as well, about the partnerships that they already have. And yeah, I think also you can often say to somebody, well, can I have a chat with one of your existing brands or clients? And actually they should be more than happy to say yes, unless, yeah, they've got something to hide. So yeah, I think, again, decide what's important to you and prioritize those, and then have that conversation with them.
Brilliant. Well, we've only got a few more minutes left, so if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And Karen actually responded to your answer by saying she absolutely agrees, and with so much stuff in the world, anything new that we put out into the market, and I think we all have a responsibility to consider this, actually, it must really count.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we need to think about how much stuff we put out there and not do things for the sake of doing them, you know, for the sake of the environment. Okay, let's have a look here. A couple of people said they need to leave. Do there any other questions? And or Wiz, is there anything else you wanted to cover that I might have interrupted?
No, I think that's it. And actually, I've got a two-part training coming up, which is a brand vision workshop and a group coaching session in 2 parts, which is why I'm going to be covering kind of the strategies that are inspired by the most successful global brands. So if you'd like to come and join that, it's a value of £200 and it's £35, and I've done a £5 off voucher for the women's chapter. So that is next week. So if anybody would like to join that, I'd love to see you there. And yeah, please do come and follow me on social media. That'd be really exciting. And yeah, I hope to connect with some of you soon.
So the workshop you're having next week is, did you say that that's to really get under the skin of the different strategies used by big players and what we can learn?
Yeah, so inspired by, I mean, all the brands that I've worked with over the many years, is it's really delving into those, and why do those brands work, and what are the key qualities, and how you can apply those to your brands. So just thinking about the bigger picture, I see a lot of brands that kind of get stuck in the day-to-day. They get overwhelmed with not understanding why their sales are plateauing, or how to take their brand to the next stage. So it's an opportunity to get together, do something creative and fun as well. So I'll be explaining what the different building blocks are, but then it's going away, creating something that's visual, whether it's digital or kind of a vision board, and then coming back 5 days later and talking about it, sharing your vision, asking me any questions that you have afterwards as well. So it's going to be quite interactive. And I think a lot of people that are brand founders are often quite creative, so having something that's visual. People often steer away from doing a business plan because they think it's an Excel spreadsheet, but it doesn't have to be. So
no, definitely. And I think also, you know, advice around that too, the business plan piece, but also really taking a look at your numbers, I guess, and thinking about what your P&L is for each of your channels in your distribution map. You know, where are you actually making money, where are you spending more than you should be, etc. And I think something like what you're proposing for next week will be a really useful tool to get people thinking about that, about the different elements of their business and the strategies that they're using for the various channels. We've had a couple of questions here. Lizzie's asked a really interesting question. What about key trends in beauty and fashion, like vegan leather, raw products? What trends will we be seeing for makeup?
Yeah, I mean, conscious consumerism for sure. I think if you're just a vegan brand, it's not enough anymore. There's lots of brands say, well, I'm vegan, I'm sustainable, I'm cruelty-free, and it's just not enough. There's hundreds of thousands of brands out there that do that. Actually, there's a lot to answer just here, but I did do a trend presentation a few weeks ago, which you can download from my website. So if you go to the blog page, there's or the events page, there's a trend presentation there, which will actually answer some of your questions about beauty and fashion as well, and sustainability and those kinds of things.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, because sustainability is such a key point, and I think it's one of those challenging concepts to navigate from a marketing perspective, because, and I think brands have previously shied away from talking about their sustainability efforts because they've felt that if they aren't completely sustainable, which there isn't such a thing, obviously, then they shouldn't talk about it. But I think we've had some refreshing perspectives from Diana, who runs Positive Luxury, who's also a member of ours, saying, actually something is better than nothing, because consumers are becoming more and more demanding. And so we should talk about what we're doing, but also what we are endeavoring to do in the future, and opening up the conversation more around sustainability and tapping into what customers want. We've had another question about, for a dream retailer or stockist, if their feedback to you is that the time is not right, would you sharpen your strategy or go back and try later?
Both. Sharpen your strategy, think about why they might not have replied, look at the brands that they are launching and why. Yeah, and then approach them again, leave it at least 3 months, and only approach when you have something new and exciting to share. So generally about how quickly your brand has grown, prove to them that they're missing out if they don't meet with you to find out more. And again, that's something that I work with brands on as well. You don't only have one chance, but you've just got to really make sure that your next time you go back, it really shines.
And in a situation like that, would you be out of line to push for more feedback and say, it's not right, that's great, but can you give me any more detailed feedback around that so that you get an understanding of the time is not right, why?
I'm laughing because the reality is you might not get any feedback. in all honesty, if you do, amazing, but I wouldn't push to get more, because you do want to go back to them and yeah, and wow them, and you don't want to have this memory of, oh, they kept pestering me. So buyers will get at least 10 new pictures a day. They will get hundreds of emails a day from their existing suppliers. They would probably love to go back and give feedback, but they just simply don't have time. That is not their KPI for their business. Their business is to take shitloads of money and have the best edit of products in there. So actually they're not doing their job if they're going back to everyone, which sounds really harsh, but it's the reality. So yeah, get some external feedback, look at what they're launching and why, and just be like, okay, really honest with yourself. What do I need to do to get my pitch into a better position for the next time?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Wiz. So we're just at time now, but I will follow up with everyone afterwards via email with some links to Wiz's new program. And I know that she's popped that in the chat as well. Wiz, I'll share with you this chat so that you can get an idea of everybody's businesses. But I have attended some of Wiz's workshops myself, and I highly, highly recommend them. So please do get in touch. And especially this one, it seems like an amazing offer. So I think I'll be attending next week. Thank you very much. And I will follow up with some links also to the research piece that you mentioned about the different industries and the trend information that you've shared there. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone, today. Wiz, a massive thank you to you. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to pick your brain and hear your insights and the amazing advice that you give to brands, and to have some golden nuggets around that. So thank you very much for making the time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for joining.
Good. We've had some lovely comments. Everyone's just saying thank you here, which is really wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. And Wiz, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.